AFC South draft grades. Houston Texans, Indianapolis Colts, Jacksonville Jaguars, Tennessee Titans. Who got better? How do we grade these draft hauls for the South? And who wants to really make a move in that division? We'll find out next.
NFL analyst Brian Peacock and former NFL scout Matt Williamson bring you expert NFL analysis every day in less than 30 minutes. Get an inside look at the NFL on the field and in the front office with elite breakdowns to next-level analysis and in-depth information only for the real NFL fans. This is Peacock and Williamson, and it starts now.
Welcome to the Peacock and Williamson NFL Show. Brian Peacock alongside Matt Williamson at BD Peacock at Williamson NFL. Make sure you tag us in your mailbag questions for Wednesday's episode. We got NFL schedule leaks. We got contracts as well we get into on tomorrow's episode. You can also drop a question in the YouTube comments. Make sure you subscribe while you are there or anywhere you are listening to this podcast. We appreciate all of our everydayers on the Locked On Podcast Network. Today's episode of Peacock and Williamson is brought to you by Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. So I asked in the open, who wants to make a move in this division? And Matt, I don't know what's going on with the Southern divisions. Head-scratching draft after head-scratching draft. All 8 of the teams combined, I'm not sure if I see the vision for any one of these teams. And it's the same in the AFC as it was in the NFC for the most part. We're going alphabetical. Let's start with the Houston Texans here, who moved out of the first round a month before the draft. I don't know if it was the right move when they made the move. I really feel like it was the wrong move after seeing how the draft unfolded and what they ended up with their haul. At first, I wanted to say, but you can include Stephon Diggs in this haul, but that was actually a future second rounder that they spent, even though they did bring in Stephon Diggs. Maybe that was the idea of adding, more day 2 picks in this draft because they knew they were going to spend some on Stephon Diggs. But looking at this haul for the Houston Texans, Kamari Lassiter, the 10th pick in round 2, cornerback nickel out of Georgia. You got Blake Fisher, offensive tackle from Notre Dame, late in round 2. In round 3, Kalen Bullock, USC safety, athletic, kind of could play some nickelish role as well. Cade Stover, the tight end from Ohio State in round 4. And then you got a bunch of 6th and 7th rounders in a class that was not a deep draft class, Matt. With Jamal Hill, Oregon linebacker, very speedy, undersized backer, former safety. Jahar Jordan, a Louisville running back in round 6, and 3 7th rounders. Solomon Byrd, USC edge rusher. Marcus Harris, Auburn defensive tackle, and Ladarius Henderson, a Michigan offensive tackle in round 7. So a lot of depth, but where's the impact for a team that's trying to go with their young quarterback now? And I see the vision with the Stephon Diggs trade, but the draft vision, I'm kind of failing to see it, Matt. Talk me through this for the Texans.
Yeah, I echo a lot of what you just said there, too. I mean, they made 9 picks, but 5 of them were 188 or later, 2 6, 3 7s. And I didn't understand the Vikings trade to move out of round 1 when it happened. Why did it have to happen 2 months ago or whatever it was? And yes, you picked up an extra second in that deal, but you turned it into Diggs more or less, so you don't have all kinds of future equity. And I guess Diggs does, that allowed Diggs to happen. Fine, whatever. But still, I mean, Lassiter's a good football player, but a bad athlete and a nickel to me. I mean, okay, he's probably your starting nickel for whatever that's worth with the 42nd pick overall and your first pick. And I think Fisher probably will be their starting right tackle. Fine. Kalen Bullock to me wasn't my favorite. He's a deep middle guy, and those guys are hard to find. And maybe he's Jimmy Ward's heir apparent, or they play more big nickel with those two and Petrie out there. Okay. And I know Cade Stover. Go ahead.
Yeah, I want to stop you for a second because how many nickels do you need? Ward,
right.
Nickel. You got Kamari Lassiter now, who is kind of a pure nickel. Desmond King is already that guy who's on the roster as well. And then Jalen Petrie is more of a safety / nickel player as well. And I know nickel is more important than it ever used to be. And I actually like the idea of having players that can all drop down. And maybe that's the idea is they're going positionless and you don't know where everyone's going to line up all the time. And different guys can drop down and play inside. but you still need some outside corners, and you've got a couple of cast-off type players in Jeff Okudah and CJ Henderson on the outside. Obviously, Derek Stingley's got one side locked up, but you got plenty of nickels already. And for a team that's trying to, maybe find impact, I think I don't know. It's just a weird draft, a weird player for them to take, and a weird strategy where, especially moving out of the first round so early at pick 23, I mean, there was a first round clean player to be had at pick 23. And I don't think you got enough value moving out of there with the I think you helped the Vikings more than you helped yourself with that trade when they did it. And especially with the 6 quarterbacks going, which is why you don't move out there, because I think there's a couple players that were going to be on the board for them they probably didn't expect when they made that trade in the first round.
100%. I mean, there's basically all the corners, I mean, and that's hindsight, of course. And, brought up Stover. I guess he's a Stroud favorite from Ohio State. Fine, but he's probably a high end 2. He's not a special player. But speaking of Stroud, I mean, last year they had the second and third pick in the draft after some trades, but they were a bad football team last draft. And to kind of sit on it, and they had a tremendous year, and I liked what the organization's doing, Coach Stroud, the whole thing. But to just take this draft and say, we don't really need impact players. We just need a couple things, some filler guys. I think you're getting a little ahead of yourself of how good you are. You need more impact players.
Yeah, we just need some more nickels, and we're going to be good.
Right.
Blake Fisher's an interesting one, and I think he went about as high as he could have, so it's not a huge value pick for me. But he does have, and look, it was a deep draft at tackle, and he's a player that I think, like Sua Mata'ia and I guess Mims, although Mims ended up going to pick 18 anyway. There's one of those prospects where it's like, man, if he would have gone back to school one more year, maybe played a full year at left tackle. Now that Alt is gone with his traits, he could have been a much higher pick. So maybe you get a guy who, is a year away, but could have been a first round guy next year. He does have a lot of what you're looking for in a starting offensive tackle. And there wasn't a lot of those guys left by the end of the second round when they took him, even though it felt a little high still. So I still like that pick where they might've got themselves an offensive tackle, but he might not quite be ready to roll, just to jump into that role as a rookie either. But an interesting pick there, and very different than the Kamari Lassiter, who is maybe you don't have the flashy upside, but is just a really darn good football player with those 2 second round picks.
Yeah, again, just not enough impact for me. Fisher, I think, will probably be the starting right tackle, but maybe it's a year away, like you said, and Howard stays at the right tackle, and although I think he's better at guard. But their line's in good shape, and I don't know. I would have liked more impact from this draft. This is a C for me.
Yeah, I put down C-. I just don't love it. I don't love the strategy from pre-draft with the trade, and I'm failing to see the impact. It's depth. It's an all depth draft for a team that
Shouldn't be done with adding stars. Right?
Fine too, but they do need a little more impact if they're going to go make a lot of noise in the AFC and be ready for prime time, which is what, I think you hope for when you hit that big with what they did in last year's draft, and clearly had the best draft of any team in the league last year.
Yeah, no, I agree. I think it's underwhelming.
Next, let's talk Indianapolis Colts, Jacksonville Jaguars, and Tennessee Titans. And there's some surprises in all of these drafts, and I'm not sure how much I love any of them, to be honest. Let's get to those next. This episode of Peacock and Williamson is sponsored by Game Time. Last minute tickets, all in prices, views from your seat, and their lowest price guarantee. Game Time takes all the guesswork out of buying NFL tickets. And we've got schedule leaks dropping. We got the entire schedule that will drop later on this week. And so if you're pumped for NFL games and want to go buy some tickets, you got to download the Game Time app, and a special offer for our listeners there as well for $20 off some potential NFL tickets or any last minute tickets you might want in your area, whether you're going to see a NBA, NHL playoff game, whether you're going to see a Major League Baseball game, or what about any concert, comedy show, or theater events near you. Game Time is the place for last minute deals, talking up to 60% off buying tickets to last minute sports, concerts, comedy near you. So take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Game Time. And by the way, if you buy one of those NFL games for later on in the season, it's right there on the Game Time app. You don't have to go fishing through your email for those tickets once it does become time to show up to your event. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem code LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off. Download the Game Time app today. Last minute tickets, lowest price guaranteed. Indianapolis Colts. You know what the Colts did a little differently this year, Matt? And it's not like they didn't get good athletes, because Latu, great athlete in the first round. A.D. Mitchell, great athlete in the second round. But the relative athletic scores didn't quite light up green like a Christmas tree like it had in the past, although Tanner Bornolini, supremely athletic with his testing numbers, a fourth-round developmental center out of the University of Wisconsin. But they had the opportunity to draft their favorite defensive player. Pick 15 overall. The first defensive player drafted in this class was Latu, edge rusher out of UCLA. Oh, apologies. I almost said USC. UCLA for those Bruins fans. That was the 15th pick in round one. Round two came back with Adonai Mitchell out of Texas, who slid a little bit. Matt Gonsalves, Pittsburgh offensive tackle. Round three, Tanner Bortolini, another offensive lineman, an athlete, and they got a lot of athletes up front on that offensive line. Blake Freeland last year got some playing time at offensive tackle. The year before it was who was the offensive tackle he drafted the year before, Matt, with testing?
Raymond. Yeah, Bernard Raymond.
Yeah, exactly. Then they go speedy wide receiver Anthony Gold, Oregon State wide receiver, return man in round 5. Jalen Carleys, who's a player I didn't watch pre-draft, a safety out of Missouri, came back with another safety out of Auburn in the 5th round, doubling up at the position. Jalen Simpson, Micah Abraham, Marshall Corner in round 6, and Jonah Lalu, defensive tackle from Oklahoma. So that is the draft class. A bunch of day 3 picks there, but really as those top 2 picks go is how this class is going to go, and a couple of developmental offensive linemen as well. For the Indianapolis Colts, what kind of grade do you throw on this draft class?
I like this one. I like late that they took 3 defensive backs in a row for special teams reasons, fill in the blanks. Unlike their counterpart, they're drafting nickels on day 3, not early. You know what I mean? Like one of those guys will contribute. I like both the linemen they took quite a bit as well. Probably a year before you had to draft offensive line so they can develop these dudes. Although I think both of them could fight with Will Fries to be the right guard. And Bortolini's probably Kelly's successor down the road at center. But you're right. The first 2 picks to me, I think, are gold. I mean, Latu, I already put money on Latu to win Defensive Rookie of the Year at plus 700. And I think he's the most ready of all the defenders that came in this draft. You're playing in a dome. You think you're going to have a pretty good offense. You should have a lot of pass rush opportunities. And I saw this morning, Adonai Mitchell took number 10 with the Colts because 10 receivers were picked ahead of him. He took it personally. And I love that because there aren't 10 receivers more talented than this guy. And you get him at the 52nd pick overall. I'm in, man. I even if it's just some big plays here and there as a rookie, I like their first 2 picks a lot.
I mean, he's got all the physical ability in the world, and he was kind of put through the ringer in the pre-draft process, people talking bad about him, and I really loved what Chris Ballard said in his post-draft press conference, and he took those anonymous scouts to task. He's like, put your name on the quote if you're going to trash a young man, and talked about him being a good kid and a young guy and still trying to figure things out, and obviously he's said all the right things, and a wide receiver with his chip on his shoulder, like that's what you want, right? And if he's got the diabetes thing down and has the nutrition and all of that figured out, and then you might have yourself a superstar player there. So when you talk through this class, I think it's pretty clearly the best class of the AFC South and of the entire South. I've got just a solid B here, and I think that's a good bet. Latu for Defensive Rookie of the Year because he's so much. I don't want to say more ready to play, but he's more of a finished product than you usually get as an edge rusher coming out of college.
Yep. I gave us a B+. I mean, for that reason, maybe he doesn't last in the league as long or have the upside of some of the others. But I think he's an immediate impact player. and a super talented receiver with a chip on his shoulder. I like the sound of that. And all of a sudden, I'm not saying they have the best skill guys in the league, but Pittman, Mitchell, Downs, who I love, Jelani Woods, Jonathan Taylor. It's not a bad five-some around a running athletic Anthony Richardson.
And they kind of all have different skill sets, which
right.
Yeah. And I like the way that they put that group together. One thing that has to happen for Chris Ballard and all the athletes he's drafted recently is a lot of these guys are going to have to hit and develop. And you could see how this could go the other way, which is why I kind of like they got a safer player, although there's an injury question with Latu in the first round. But Mitchell could be a bust. Tanner Borlini, the tape doesn't match his athleticism. He needs a year in an NFL weight room. He kind of bounced around positions, played a lot of different positions on the offensive line. Being able to focus again on another year at center, if that's his future position, will probably help him. So development is needed, and it's up to the coaches now with all these high-level athletes that Ballard's been drafting is to get the most out of them. You got to, it's not you don't get to play combine on Sundays. You got to play football. So how these guys develop is going to be the key, none more than their young quarterback as well in year two.
And this is a much bigger conversation. I know we've touched on it slightly in the past, but with today's CBA, it's harder to develop players than it ever was. I mean, there's no 2-a-days anymore. You know what I mean? Like there's just not much practice time.
An offensive lineman, because the other guys can at least play 7-on-7. Linemen can't hardly hit each other.
Right. It's hard to develop players in general, but linemen especially. Yes.
Jacksonville Jaguars up next here. Let's take a look at Trent Baalke's draft class for the Jags in 2024. And it started with the trade down from 17 to 23, where they selected LSU wide receiver Brian Thomas Jr. And going back to the well 3 times at LSU, Matt, Mason Smith, defensive lineman, big sort of 5 technique style of a defensive tackle. Mason Smith out of LSU in round 2. Did not like the value at all of that selection, but I did love the first pick with Brian Thomas and where they got him at 23. Jerrion Jones, Florida State corner in round 3. Javon Foster, Missouri offensive tackle, like that pick in round 4 where they're able to get him as the tackle or a guard in the NFL. I think he's most likely an interior guy, but he could play tackle, has some length to him and size. Jordan Jefferson, another defensive tackle out of LSU in round 4. DeAndre Prince, Ole Miss corner in round 5, coming back in round 5 with Kellen Robinson, defensive running back out of Texas. You got a kicker out of Arkansas, Cam Little in round 6, and Miles Cole, Texas Tech edge rusher in round 7. How do you grade this haul for Jacksonville?
Yeah, I don't like their last 4 picks all that much. I don't see much impact there from 2 5th-rounders, a 6th and a 7th, to be honest with you. I love the Thomas pick. You get him after a trade down and you're patient, and you still get a potential number 1 receiver. And those aren't words I throw around loosely.
By the way,
what's that?
The Houston Texans pick originally that went through Minnesota and ended up in division rival Jacksonville Jaguars' hands. And guess what? Brian Thomas Jr. How about that kind of an impact for your young quarterback? What would that have looked like? Maybe don't even have to do the deal with Buffalo to get Stephon Diggs in that case, if you get Brian Thomas Jr. So that's an interesting wrinkle for Texans fans that they have a hard time covering Brian Thomas Jr. in that division. Yeah.
And again, I really like that pick. I thought Smith was a little early, but there was a ton of buzz around him. I did a lot of work on him, and maybe he does have a high ceiling. Jerrion Jones, to me, will probably fight with Darby right off the bat as a starting corner. I think he's more than a nickel. At minimum, he's maybe the nickel. It looks like Savage is, kind of penciled in there. Did you need both the Louisiana State defensive tackles? It's all right. Foster,
well, my question is, okay, well, why didn't neither one of them showed enough on tape for me.
Right.
Mason Smith, where he got drafted. That's why I didn't like that pick. He was like, okay, sure. He was a 5-star player, but that was
5 years ago or 4 years ago.
Oversized high school kid. When are you going to see it on the field? And I didn't see enough of it from Mason Smith or Jordan Jefferson.
Yeah. And I do think Foster has upside as either a right tackle or guard, as you mentioned.
Mm-hmm.
Jefferson's probably a rotational plugger, when it's all said and done. This is a C+ for me because I did like the Thomas pick.
It says something that my third favorite pick of this class of 8 or 9 guys was a kicker in round 6. That's where you're supposed to take kickers.
Yeah.
Round 6, that's fine. You get a guy who might play for your team for a long time and put points on the board. So I like that. I like Foster, like Thomas. Didn't love.
I'm okay with Jerry and Jones. They played a lot of man at Florida State. I think he's a quality player, but not a ton upside.
Yeah, and that Florida State defense was really good, and they were. And in fact, speaking of LSU, Florida State, they locked up that LSU offense, that defense of
to say the least. It's okay. I gave us C+. Yeah, I'm cool with that. Yeah,
I got down here C+ for the Jacksonville Jaguars. And the thing about Brian Thomas is, as good as he is, the reason he slid to 23 is a little bit one-dimensional type of a player. So he has to develop the rest of his game. But man, he is dynamic in that one dimension.
Yeah, and I don't know that he's going to be counted on to do a ton his rookie year. I'm sure Kirk and Ingram will probably lead the team in targets, and he can be a downfield, bring him along slow. He was not a very developed route runner.
Yeah, those guys are over the middle players. He's a downfield outside guy. So the fit is good. And, Trevor Lawrence needs that too. So a few big plays probably, but not a high volume rookie at all.
He's a little redundant with Gabe Davis, but I think he's so much better than Gabe Davis. I would never save this. I would never sign Gabe Davis.
Jacksonville's trying to figure out wide receiver. They keep trying. So good on them. Maybe you found your guy now. You don't have to keep overpaying guys.
Maybe, but I have a feeling Gabe Davis is going to be the typical Jag that got paid early and too much, and a year from now or two will be a cap casualty.
Tennessee Titans next. They drafted a tackle, not the one everyone mocked to them, though. How about this Tennessee class to finish up the AFC South? Today's episode of Peacock and Williamson is brought to you by FanDuel, America's #1 sports book. It's winner take all time in the NBA and NHL playoffs, and FanDuel is here to help you bring home a big W of your own, because right now new customers get $150 in bonus bets with any winning $5 bet. That's $150 to bet on spreads, money lines, player props, and a whole lot more. If you don't want to bet on NBA or NHL playoffs, that's okay. Major League Baseball, every day this summer, you can bet on games. And how about those NFL futures? The schedule's coming out. You see some games you want to put down some money on. You want to bet on your team to win the Super Bowl. You want to bet on your team to win offensive or defensive rookie of the year. You can find all of it at FanDuel. Visit FanDuel.com/lockedon to make every playoff shot count. FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. Tennessee Titans. Joe Alt was pick 7 in every single mock draft, Matt. And then Jim Harbaugh. Of
course it didn't happen.
Chargers. You knew it couldn't happen. You can't have that much of a lock of a pick in the NFL draft. And so Jim Harbaugh said, nope, Joe Alt's not going 7 because he's going 5. And so the next offensive line on the board for those Tennessee Titans was the big old 340-pounder out of Alabama, J.C. Latham, going 7 overall. Probably going to flip sides from right tackle to left tackle. Latham says he can do it. We didn't get any testing numbers for him. And they came back in round 2 with Tavondre Sweat, nose tackle out of the University of Texas. Cedric Gray, linebacker out of North Carolina in round 4. Jarvis Brownlee, Louisville corner in round 5. Jaquan Jackson, Tulane wide receiver in round 6. Pair of 7th rounders. James Williams out of Miami, the safety. And then Jalen Harrell to finish it up for the Titans 2024 class, Michigan edge rusher in round 7. 7 selections, some boomer bust. My favorite 2 picks are the in the middle of the draft. Cedric Gray, round 4, Jarvis Brownlee, round 5. I like those 2 picks. I think those are guys that are going to contribute. I think Cedric Gray, you're probably getting a starting linebacker in early round 4. So love that. But obviously, long term, when you look at this draft, it's those first 2 picks. Did they get a left tackle in J.C. Latham and Tavondre Sweat? How many snaps is he going to play for your defense? And is he going to be a guy you can count on in the middle of that defense for the Titans? Feels really high for where they got Sweat versus how his pre-draft season went.
Yeah, I'm going to start with those mid-round picks because I do think Brownlee will stick in this league. And he can play inside, he can play outside. I like his game a lot. I don't love their off-the-ball linebackers, so Gray has a pretty clear path. I think he's a little bit raw, but maybe this time next year, he's a upper-tier starting linebacker. I mean, he has those type of traits. And then Jackson from Tulane is a small guy. He's a returner. He's a slot. But all of a sudden, their receivers, he's going to make the team. Kyle Phillips, Jawan Jackson, Tyler Boyd, Ridley, Hopkins, Westbrook-Akine, who they brought back, and Treylon Burks, who I keep bringing up on my Steelers show. Like, I might throw you a 6th-round pick for Pittsburgh, just, pry Treylon Burks away from you. And I didn't even like him coming out of Arkansas, but
I like that.
Just throw him somewhere else and use him differently. Sweat pick is not for me. I think he's too big, and I think he just won't. There'll be reps when he's next to Simmons where it looks unbelievable, but there'll be reps when he's huffing and puffing or on the sidelines and isn't useful. I adore Latham, and, you have Daddy there, Daddy Callahan to make the switch with the kid from left to right, but I don't know that, I'm sitting here looking at their depth chart. Is Dylan Reduce or Nicholas Petit-Friere such an obstacle that you couldn't just leave him at right tackle? I know that doesn't leave you anything on the left side, but I don't love all these first-round O-line position changes. Because he was as right tackle gets.
He seemed like the perfect, draft him as a right tackle, play him as a right tackle.
I mean, I know those lines are more blurred than when I was a kid, you know what I mean? But
right. And the league is telling us they don't care, because we talked about this yesterday.
Yeah.
Every single first-round offensive lineman will play a different position in the NFL as a rookie than he played in college.
It's nuts, every one of them. I mean, even Powers Johnson and Barton and Alt, who everyone thought was a plug-and-play left tackle, goes to a team with a left tackle.
Interesting. And look, my question with Sweat is, how many snaps will he impact your football team?
Mm-hmm.
As good as he might be wrecking the entire the inside of the line for the run. And I know it's still important, even though this is not the same league it used to be as far as having that sort of run stuffing interior defensive lineman. How many snaps will he impact for your team? And are those few snaps worth it? And who else was going to draft him this high? That's my question.
I don't think anybody. Yeah. I'm glad you said that, because I don't think anybody. I want to go back to the offense, though, real quick, because I do give Carolina did this to some regard. Certainly the Bears, but I mean, Tennessee did a very nice job this offseason of setting up Levis to either succeed or fail. Like, I think with Tony Pollard and Spears in the backfield and 3 potential big-time offensive linemen in Latham, Skoronski, and Cushenberry, all those pass catchers I mentioned, and throw Chig on top of it, you should know, is Levis our guy or not after this season? I mean, yes or no. All I need is a yes or no. I mean, yes is better, but I need to know that.
It's a C- class for me.
Me too.
And look, that's a passing grade. Our grades aren't as high. We don't have a bunch of A's that we're giving out to all these teams. So if you're a Titans fan, don't get too mad at us, but that's fine too. Let us know. Drop a question for tomorrow's mailbag episode at BD Peacock, at Williamson NFL, or in the YouTube comments. Is the league, so the league was getting smaller and smaller and smaller and faster and throwing more and more, right? And it feels like we kind of hit a tipping point where it's coming back the other way at least a little bit. Is it snapping back a lot? Is it now a league where, we want 340-pound offensive linemen. We want 366-pound to 390-pound defensive tackles again. We're going to run the ball. We're going to win with brute strength. And is it just the Titans philosophy, or are we seeing a little bit more of a shift, or are we going to see maybe more of a league where, and I kind of hope this is the direction it's going, is that the league is going in a direction where we just get a lot of different teams that have so wildly different philosophies that we're going to get a team that's trying to play bully ball and run the ball and be big and tough. And then you got a team over here in this side of the country, and they just want to throw the heck of the ball. And they're in Miami, and they want to have 4-3 everywhere. And they don't care about those January football games in the snow. What direction is this league going, Matt? Because I think everyone's kind of has a different idea of where it is, especially the teams or the people that are in charge of putting those teams together.
Yeah, I want to stick with the Titans on that, because to start free agency, they exchanged Derrick Henry for Tony Pollard. Like, yeah, they both are RBs, but they're not at all the same. And then they spend money on Ridley and then Boyd. And like, I'm thinking, Vrabel's gone. This team's going finesse.
Yeah.
And then they get the 2 most rugged, biggest dudes in the draft with their first 2 picks. Like, I'm not quite sure what their identity is. And I think they're trying to figure that out. But I look at smart teams. I'm not saying that Titans aren't, but like the Rams, to me, when they draft Avila last year at guard, put him in at center at 300 and 3.25 or whatever he weighs in at, and then pay 2 guards, I think McVay is telling you, as well as other teams out there, that if you're going to play too high in zone all the time, I'll take 6 yards on the ground and beat your face, you know?
And so many teams are facing those McVay, Shanahan tree offenses now, and there's so much wide zone running game, and they're getting better and better at defending that. And so you're seeing Shanahan and McVay now counter that with counters with more
Power
runs and bigger offensive linemen, because they're like, well, we still need to be able to run the ball, and if you're going to take this away, we have to be able to do this as well. Even though we're still going to do the other thing, we need bigger offensive linemen to knock you off the ball a little bit too. So we don't want to be completely finesse. And then you still have in this same division the Houston Texans drafting a 219-pound linebacker, right?
Yeah.
And you have Cedric Gray, who in this very same draft class for the Texans is, not an old school 245-pound linebacker himself for the Tennessee Titans.
I don't think we've gotten to the point where you're going to get Levon Kirkland back there, though.
Right.
Like
there's some size somewhere, but it's not everywhere. So you're still and I guess that's maybe the answer is, look, let's be huge on the line so we can be small and fast everywhere else.
Maybe. Yeah. I mean, if I can compete in the run game with lighter boxes and still keep a too high shell, I can hang around and win football games. Like using the Rams again, I bet McVay is begging to run it down your throat over and over so that you bring an extra guy in the box, and Stafford's throwing in-breakers to Kupp and Nakua all day long, rocket shots.
That is the AFC. What was your grade for the Titans?
We get the same one. What'd you say? C-2?
Minus, yeah.
And Latham's one of my favorite players in this draft, but
yeah, I know you love Latham, but it's different drafting him at 20 than at 7.
Yeah. Oh, he was a run to the podium guy for me for the Steelers at 20, but yeah, I don't think he's that much different than Fuaga or.
Yeah. Did you not get any trade down offers? Did you really just think it was a 2-man draft at the offensive line? So a lot of questions there with how this draft went at the very top for the Tennessee Titans.
Yeah.
Next is the West. We'll finish it up with the NFC and AFC West and have all of our post-draft grades done for all the teams in the NFL. But first, tomorrow, we're going to hit the mailbag. We've got schedule leaks. At BD Peacock, at Williamson NFL. Drop a question in the YouTube comments. Matt and I back tomorrow right here. Peacock and Williamson.